Good evening, everybody. It's me, Paddy, here from across the shuck. I have Justin, who is that handsome fella in the blue shirt, and I have Dan, the other fella, and then we have Ben Belkin, who's with us tonight, all the way from Arizona. And you're very, very welcome to God's country. Um, and we're going to just do this as friends chatting. This isn't going to be an interview. We're just going to barrage him with questions. We'll just make this very simple, very chilled out. And I'm going to start it off by saying, Ben, tell us a bit about yourself, your family, what you do. Just fill us in a wee bit about who Ben Belkin really is.
Well, first, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to hang out with you guys today. I know it's the evening where you are. It's about 11:30 in the morning here. So when I say here, I'm referring to the Phoenix, Arizona. That's where I live. I've lived here since 1999. And before that, I grew up in the Detroit area of Michigan, and that's where I was born. And so, I was 18 turning 19 when I moved to Arizona. I've had a few different sort of avenues in my career. I went to school and studied housing and urban development, which was basically learning how to develop real estate projects. After that, I had a job with a home builder. So I was managing construction projects for single family homes. And then I did some building projects up in the northwestern part of the United States in Oregon and Washington. Moved back to Phoenix, worked for another builder and transitioned from there into the land development business. And so for what was about, 12 or 13 years or so, I was in that real estate business, and I learned a lot about business in the real estate business. I've always enjoyed technical things. Back in high school is where I learned drafting and AutoCAD. So I really, enjoyed that technical education and those skills. Well, around 2012, I felt like having a change, and I went into business with a friend doing something totally different. We started like an internet marketing company. Our goal is to learn how to make money online. I've always really enjoyed working on the computer. And so I thought it would be an interesting opportunity to see if I can make something of that. And also because I was ready to own a business and try to make my own way. And so we did that for a while, and that actually dovetailed into sort of, I don't want to say reuniting with my sisters, because they're my sisters, but they were working on similar projects, and it created an opportunity for us to work together. And I don't know if you guys have ever worked with siblings. It's an interesting situation. They're great partners because they know you better than anyone, but then they're not afraid to just absolutely fight with you over who knows what. So it's an interesting ball of wax. But I had a successful business with my sisters, an online-based business. And I won't get into too much detail about that because they're private people. So I learned a lot about selling high volumes of physical products online. Around my 40th birthday, which was in 2020, I really started thinking about what type of project I'd like to work on for the next 40 years of my life. And taking all the things I've learned about, using online resources to make money, about how to structure and run a business from a small start to ultimately a large scale, but making sure that it was something I was super passionate about and really, really understood. Because ever since I've been an entrepreneur, I've always had partners, and usually my partners were the driving force in what it is we're selling and what it is we're going to create. And I was always more of the nuts and bolts partner. Okay, here's how we're going to set this up. These are our systems. Here's how we keep track of everything. And so I was always sort of left out of the creative side of it. And that's what I think was nagging at me as missing in my life. So when I started to really reflect on my 40 years prior and my 40 years future, that's when I started thinking about what to do and thinking about the resources I have, my skills. And I had this idea for the knife company. And once I sort of envisioned it and I saw that I had all the pieces in place, I was like, I can't unsee that now. Like, that's it. This has to be it. And I'm going to give it 1,000%. Like, my commitment to myself was, this is going to be my best effort. You know, there might be someone out there who could do it better than me, and that's fine. But I'm only responsible for my own effort.
Because this is around the time when I met you. Well, it was before your 40th birthday, because I remember talking on Bob's The Knife Junkie, and that's where I met you when you were showing off your knife collection. And then the inklings of the business was coming along then. And then I've been lucky enough to go through that journey, watching you. The amount of effort and work that you put in has got to be better than anybody ever has, because COVID came along, and to survive that was a battle. And changing companies was horrendous for you.
That's right. Yeah, it's the whole thing has been met with a lot of challenges. You know, and of course, when you're going to take that kind of shot at anything, like, you need the support of your loved ones and family, you know, because they're going to make sacrifices right alongside you, especially as a thing is growing. And so you asked me about my family. Well, I'm married. My wife and I have been married since 2009. I have a daughter who's 12. I have a son who's 9, going on 10. And so, like, you know, yeah. And, you know, they rely on me. I'm the breadwinner. And so for me to pursue something like this, and, you know, to be honest with you, like, I've had to put every single resource I have into this, not just time, but financial as well. So I have basically everything riding on this. It's like, make it or break it. And, you know, my wife had to be 100% on board with that and clearly understand the risk if I wasn't successful. But, you know, she believes in me, and she likes me more when I'm chasing my dreams instead of helping someone, you know, realize theirs, let's say. So that was like the last piece of the puzzle for me, knowing that I have my family support to sort of just go for it. And to comment on what you said, Stephen, like, it hasn't been the easiest road, honestly. Like, and I don't care who you are or what your entrepreneurial journey is, that's how it's going to be for you. I'm sure someone gets lucky and finds the easy path. But to anybody out there listening who's thinking about a journey like this, like, just know that it won't be easy, but you just don't give up. You know, you always try to find a way to solve the problem. And don't let your own fear get in your way, is what I would say.
Ben, can I ask you a question? Why knives?
Knives. Well, I love knives. You know,
What's not to love?
It has been the case ever since, literally as far back as I can remember. And so for anyone who has bought a Jack Wolf knife, you get the box, the story's on the back of the box. But for those of you who haven't seen that before, I'll just sum it up. So when I was a kid, I used to spend a lot of time with my grandparents, my father's parents. Well, I guess all my grandparents, but particularly my father's parents in this case. And I really looked up to my grandfather. That was Jack Wolf Belkin, and that's who I named the company after. Now, my grandpa was just the coolest dude. Like, he was a builder in the Detroit area. He traveled the world back in the 50s when people didn't really do that as much. He would go to France and get on his hands and knees and, like, crawl into these caves to look at cave paintings. He fished all over the world. He was just the toughest son of a bitch, you know, and, like, you didn't mess with the guy. And so to me, he was my idol. And he always had a pocket knife, like, and sometimes two, you know. And, like, I just thought his stuff was the coolest stuff, whether it was his ring or his watch, but particularly that pocket knife. And every time he would come home from work, up on his dresser, he had, like, a glass dish. And I'm sure it was like my grandma's crystalware, you know, like, nowadays we've got fancy leather trays and stuff. He just took my grandma's, like, dish from the kitchen, and he would put his pocket stuff in there. And I would, like, reach up and snatch that pocket knife. And by the time I was old enough to do that, he was carrying exclusively Swiss Army knives. he loved Swiss Army knives because all the little tools, you know, it like suited his personality. They were super practical for his job and picking out his nails and cutting stuff or whatever. And that was it, man. Once I held his Swiss Army knife for the first time, I was bit by the knife bug, and I've been collecting knives ever since. It has literally not stopped since I was probably 4 years old.
Has this last couple of years that you've been working so hard on the Jack Wolf knives, are you still collecting for yourself, or has that had to drop to the side?
That is a very interesting question, because I honestly, if you would ask me, do you think you'll slow down your collecting once you start making knives? I've been like, no, I'm going to have access to more knives now. But honestly, the desire to buy knives for myself has become substantially less. And I think it's because like I now have these like creations that are, you know, my own little babies, you know? And so I've been passing on opportunities left and right to buy stuff. You know, I'll buy a knife if like I meet someone in the industry and they're starting a company, you know, similar to how I'm doing it. I'll support guys and buy their stuff. Yeah. But it's not because like I have to have it. It's because I want to support them. And honestly, between all the knives, like I save one of each from every production run, and for a reference library for me, and I carry them. And so now I'm carrying my own stuff. And I've got a bunch of prototypes, and I'm like honestly drowning in knives at this point. I've never felt like I was drowning in knives until recently. Now I'm drowning.
It's funny you should say that, because the other man in the meeting, Dan, is drowning in knives. His house is actually coming down with knives. His wife and children basically have to wade through piles of knives just to see him. I mean, it's insane, really. Your place is a lot better organized than his, by the way, I have to say.
That's the last discount you get, Just.
Oh, I know. Well, what are you gonna do? But that's absolutely brilliant, Ben. Brilliant. It's and very interesting. As a matter of interest, is part of the reason that the desire to buy knives is because is due to the level of quality you've seen on your own? Is it hard to match that?
No, I don't think so, because, you know, I've been blessed to have resources to buy custom slip joints from like the world's best makers. Now, it's hard to collect those in any substantial numbers. I mean, at least for me. But I've been blessed to build a collection of a decent amount of knives that are from anywhere from, let's say, $700 to $1,500 US. Now, you know, as much as I like to talk about the quality of my knives, I'm not going to say this is the same quality of a handmade knife that costs $1,000 US from a guy who's been making them as perfect as it gets for the last 10 years, you know? And so more so, I think, because it's hard to describe why, you know, that desire has been changing for me. I think a lot of it is like the effort I have to put into, let's say, buy a knife is just totally different from the effort I've had to put in to produce these. And I'm getting a tremendous amount of emotional satisfaction, which I think is the root reason we carry certain knives, is because it gives us emotional satisfaction. Like, it's a given that they function as a tool. Like, we're not buying knives that don't function as a tool. So then why do we pick one over the other? Emotional satisfaction, 100%. You know? Definitely. And so I'm getting tremendous emotional satisfaction out of these. And it's not just, I think, like a selfish satisfaction, but because like I know now that there's like 1,000 of you guys out there also getting the emotional satisfaction out of carrying these. And like, if someone writes me a message, like, I want to pull mine out of my pocket and they've got theirs in their pocket, and like, we could talk about it, you know? Yeah. Like, I want to carry my stuff because you guys are carrying my stuff, and that just gets me like super geeked.
The other side of it, you talked about the emotional side of it. The fact that you're so open to the general public out there who are now buying your knives. I know a lot of us have been friendly with you, you know, on YouTube, as friendly as you can be on YouTube. But look, I haven't been financially on the journey with you. I haven't been the stress that you have, but I have been on a journey with you. and to see the end result, which was promised long before we ever seen it. And that's really unusual in my life. And when I'm spending on toys, because basically I have enough knives, I only need one knife to last me the rest of my days. This new Jack Wolf could be my one and only knife. It would last me, I could hand it down to my grandchildren.
You don't, Steve, please don't do that. You can hand that down to me.
No, me. No, well, actually, you can have that one. I want the others.
That's my favourite. I've not had it in my hand yet, but that looks amazing. That fat spear. As soon as I saw it, I just got excited. That is just.
You'll never see it.
No, it was funny because we were joking beforehand, but we were talking about how it comes down to personal taste in many ways, and it's funny. I loved the sharpshooter. I loved the laid back Jack. I loved, what were the other one? The little bro, was it?
Little bro.
And I mean, those were, every single one of them absolutely perfect. This one, Ben, I have to tell you, Fat Spear doesn't do it for me. The double leg looks really, really cool, but and these two give me no end of grief because these two idiots love a Fat Spear. Me, I have standards. I like an elegant slim spear. You know, I mean, what were you thinking, man? What were you thinking?
Well, it's probably a lot of my own bias, but at the same time, it's also, I'm making products that I think the market is going to buy ultimately. Yeah. And I think I have a unique point of view as a collector, as like a feverish, psychotic knife collector, you know, who has been stalking the Facebook pages and watching all the sales and engaging in the conversation. And I feel like I've got my finger on the pulse as good as most folks could. And every time Great Eastern Cutlery particularly makes a fat spear, people go bananas for it. Yeah. They go bananas. And so, and there's a lot of knives that have a slender spear on the market, like anything Swiss Army makes, you know, Victorinox makes is a slender spear. So to me, it's like I've got a balance, you know, it's a balance between my own personal biases, what I think will sell, and, you know, being original at the same time, and sort of trying to like pick what to do. And in this case, and with these spear points I've designed so far, not to say they'll all have to be this way, I've leaned towards the fat spear because I think that people really want them.
Yeah. Well, I've never been fashionable, as you can tell. So I'm probably out of step with everybody else, it has to be said.
Justin, would you put a picture up of the I was going to say the fat spear of the...
Give me a sec and I'll get a picture up there.
Put the same one here. Ben, how long did it take you to design this spear point blade to fit in this tiny part of a handle and just absolutely tuck away? That to me is genius. That is genius.
Okay. It's not easy to get these things where I think they're just right, where all the lines are where they need to be. So a little insight into designing a slip joint, okay? The like first thing that I think people maybe don't give them credit for is like they're complicated, but yet they look simple, right? Like what could be so hard about designing a knife that has a spring, a blade, and a couple of scales? It's like, well, it's actually quite complicated because there's all these relationships inside that knife that have to exist in harmony. And some examples of those are as follows, right? So when the knife is closed, the tip can't be sticking out, right? When the knife is closed, the cutting edge can't be too close to the back spring or else you can get blade wrap, right? You've got this tang, which is hidden inside the knife, and the corners of that tang interact with the spring. And so you have to have the distance between the center of the pivot and the corner of the tang directly impacts how far the spring is driven out when you open and close the knife. So you have to have like a proper relationship there between those parts. You know, I always try to get it so that the spring in the back where it terminates, like if you were looking straight down at the top, and then like where the bolster ends almost meet, but like is a little bit taller, you know? And so, and then also like, if it's going to be pinchable, my goal is to have every knife be pinchable. So like we all like having nail nicks, but I think we all like pinching them open even more, you know? So now all of a sudden I have to have enough blade sticking out so that I can pinch it open. And so, and then on top of all that, it has to be aesthetically pleasing, right? So now I've got to make sure that the blade is aesthetically pleasing, the handle's aesthetically pleasing. When it's in the closed position, all the spacing is right, the tip isn't out, I've got enough room to pinch, that the geometry of the spring and the tang and everything is right, so it feels right when you open and close it. It's like a lot. And if anything, it's just like this puzzle. And you never solve it perfectly, but you box in everything until it's like, ooh, it's so good right now. And like, I'd like to maybe change this, but then this affects that. And then I blew it open, you know?
I sit and think about things like this quite a lot, really, but too much. But Tony Bowes, when Tony Bowes started out and was making knives, he didn't have CAD, he didn't have all this, and yet his knives were from the beginning were amazing. How clever must that have been to do that without CAD?
Absolutely. I mean, they called him the old dog, and he has the respect of everybody. And I guess my only regret is I never got a chance to meet him. Or I also regret not buying some of his pieces because, you know, he's not making anymore, obviously. But yeah, like, see, he took a completely different approach, right? Like he was drawing things by hand, making parts, fitting parts. You know, I don't have that skill. You know, I don't have that skill. I don't have the tools. I don't have the experience. I'm sure somebody could teach me, but I go about skinning the cat a different way, you know, as they say, more than one way to skin a cat. So yeah, I have the utmost respect for the guys who make these knives and execute them. Even the guys who start with a pattern and don't design the patterns from scratch, just making these things is so freaking hard, you know? And like, you mess up one little thing, guys who have the eye to know what to look for are going to see it, because you basically can't hide it. You know, where are you going to hide a spring that isn't flush in all three positions? Where are you going to hide a blade that isn't center? Where are you going to hide grinds that aren't symmetrical? Like, you're not hiding that stuff. Where are you going to hide a pivot that doesn't feel right? Not happening.
Do you think that you can grow into being a traditional knife lover, or do you have to start out that way?
You can absolutely grow into it. Absolutely. And that has been like my mission with these things is like, there's nothing more satisfying to me than when I'm at the shows or when I get a message from someone and they say, Ben, I was not a slip joint guy, but I got this thing and now I get it. Like, I love hearing that. My goal is to convert as many of these big, chunky, modern knife loving, not that they're chunky, but the knives are chunky, right? These guys that love these big, chunky, modern tactical knives. And I'm not trying to disparage those knives. Like, they have their place, but I don't think those knives perform as far as cutting as well as these do. And I don't think they have the same like sex appeal that these do, in my opinion. And they definitely don't have the same heritage or track record as these things. Like, these shapes have been around for centuries. What the hell withstands centuries of time, right? Timeless things withstand centuries of time. And to me, that's the root of what makes these so special, is like generation after generation, from grandfather to father to son, they will not die. In some form or fashion, they will not die. And how can a guy, maybe they're not for everyone, but there's a lot of people who just haven't discovered them yet. And that's where I saw the opportunity with the modern materials, because it's like, the man of today, he's got all these great steels. He's got titanium, he's got this fancy carbon fiber, and like, that's what he likes. And, to pick up a traditional knife made of bone or nickel silver and 1095 and stuff, it's like a bridge too far. It's like, man, that's cool, I guess, but like, not for me. Immediately dismissed, right? But then they can pick up something like this and then like, man, that's familiar, but it's so different. I got to check it out. I got to try one. And then they start doing the walk and talk, and it's so intoxicating. Before long, you don't even know it. You've been doing this for an hour, you know?
And they talk about fidget knives now. There's nothing more fidgety than a traditional knife. Nothing
more fidgety than a slip joint. And so once they start down this rabbit hole, where's the next logical step? Like, maybe I got to try one of those Great Easterns. Maybe I got to try an old case. You know, maybe I got to give Swiss Army knives another chance, because now, like, they get it.
Because I was one of those ones. I started on modern knives because it was new to me. I didn't even realize over here there was places I could buy the modern knives, because it's just not talked about over here. It's getting better, but it's changing slowly, and it's lovely. But I only started about maybe 4 years ago, getting properly into slip joints. And it's just taken over my collection. I maybe have 20 locking knives now. The rest are traditional, which is I had about 400 knives that were just sitting there, and I wasn't even using them. Do you know what I mean? Whereas I'll rotate my slip joints. And it's been an amazing journey. And then you get to meet people like Dan, who's different, and Justin. And there is a bond between people who like slip joints. I think even better than what it is with a locking crowd. Does that make sense? Maybe I'm being biased, but there does seem to be the want for traditional not to die, the want for the patterns not to die.
Could I just weigh in? I think what Ben just said about regarding the slip joint and stuff like that, I honestly couldn't agree with you more. They are, like you said, you can have these fancy sort of axis locks, titanium with really nice steels in them and stuff like that, but they're just not a slip joint, are they? When you talk about, I think that the Sodbuster, the first one, the farming knives, were made to. I read somewhere they were made traditionally, about 1600s. So what's that, like 400 odd years old? It's probably older, some of them, but I know they've become quite popular. They started making them for working on the farms and stuff like that. And you think that was a slip joint? That was the most basic of slip joints, you know. So, and that you think, how did they make that? That would have been made in some like farm shed, just with a couple of bits of wood. And I've got a picture of someone somewhere, and it's literally just this knife, and it's just a couple of bits of wood, like with a bit of spring and a knife, but it is like a really, really old slip joint. And then for me, that's what really, I saw that ages ago. That's what really got me into slip joints, and I probably got 200 sacks here today, just in my drawer, all slip joints, and 95% of the knives I like to buy in are slip joints, because there's like Ben, you're so right, and about your knife, having your knife in your hand is just like, you described it perfectly. It's not traditional, but it's not modern. It's a category of its own. It's just everything you've taken and put into one and gone, here's perfection. Here's modern. You're right. You can't get a buffalo horn or bone or whatever or bog oak and then whack a really brand new super steel in there. It doesn't work with a nice shape. It's wrong. But when you go, well, what about here? What about if I give you a super steel? I give you carbon fiber, but I give you in a traditional slip joint look, weight and feel. That's perfection. Absolute perfection.
I appreciate it. Yeah. I appreciate it. And there, I've seen a lot of modern made slip joint knives. Like, they have a slip joint mechanism, but the designers, in my opinion, for my taste, stray too far off the reservation when they design the handles and the blade shapes and the grinds. Because it's like, well, yes, it has a slip joint in it, but it's not a slip joint anymore. It's not, what makes a traditional knife is the fact that, like, the dog leg has been around forever. This sway back has been around forever. Spear shapes, whether slender or fat, that look like this with these swedges and these nail nicks have been around forever. And what's amazing to me is something that was so ubiquitous as these knives, these clips points, these sheep's foots. Like, nowadays, they don't look like everything else. You scroll through Instagram and look at blade profiles on, 100% of what's there. And like 5% of it has this super unique aesthetic where, 100 years ago, 100% of the stuff looked like this. So like allowing sort of this stuff to be rekindled and reintroduce people to this timeless aesthetic, for me, is like, that's what it's all about. So, so I'm trying to be very careful to what I consider the soul, which is like the handle shapes and the blade shapes and like the things that I don't want to stray too far off the reservation and lose. I've got long pole nicks and crescent nicks. Like that's how they're done. I don't have giant fullers. I have swedges. I don't have stuff that you wouldn't see on an older knife. So I'm trying to make sure I pay homage to the soul of these old-fashioned knives.
Here's another problem I have with your knives, and it's a nice problem to have. I've found it very difficult in my collection to get another knife to compare it to. But there was one maker who you turned me on to when we used to talk with Bob, and somebody you collected his knives was Enrique Pena. And you have quite a good relationship with Enrique, didn't you? In the early part as well. Are you still quite close to Ricky Pena or Enrique? Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. And credit has to be given where credit is due. I would say the guys that really pioneered this space, albeit custom knives and not production knives, was Enrique and Jared Ogier. Like those two guys before anybody else. And audience, correct me if I'm wrong, but at least on a scale to where there was exposure within the knife community, they were blending the modern materials with the traditional patterns. Now, those knives were $800 and above, so they were unreachable for a large part of the population, and they can't make that many. So even if you could afford it, you couldn't necessarily buy one from the maker, to your specifications. But yes, I'm still very close with Enrique. I consider him a great friend. He's the one who sort of put one of the puzzle pieces in place for me when I started the company by introducing me to the factory so I could get prototypes. Now, you can, of course, cold call any factory, but I feel like it's nice to have a personal introduction from an existing customer. So he basically put his name on the line to say, hey, this is my friend Ben. You should do business with him. He's a trustworthy individual. And of anybody alive today, he is my favorite slip joint maker. He has the eye for the design. His execution is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, it is absolutely ridiculous. And he's one of these rare dudes that can cross over and make slip joints or make tactical knives, And, but if you guys can find an Enrique Pena on the secondary market, you will not be disappointed.
I just went out and got this Enrique Pena because I got this Pena today. I bought this because I wanted it to go with your knives that I could give a comparison. Now, I'm not going to tell you what I think of it because I only got it in this afternoon, and I only got my Jack Wolf this afternoon as well. So I haven't had time to set them down. But it's going to be really nice to have a knife that is in that ballpark that I can actually put your knife down beside and give an honest opinion on what it's like. And I think that as a YouTuber, you have to do that. Or it's all right saying Ben's knife wonderful, but what are you putting it up against, or what's your expectation of it? But when you've got somebody else like Ricky, now this is a production knife like yours, but it's something that I've got now that I can actually put yours beside. And so far, very, 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 very favorable. I'll give that little bit away. They are just two smashing knives.
Anytime I'm in the conversation with Enrique, I'm happy to be in the conversation. That dude is a master, and I don't ever expect to measure up to him in any way, shape, or form. I look up to him. I'm inspired by him. He's the one I call when I need to solve a design problem in the knife. Like he's the teacher, I'm the student. So if I'm in the conversation with Enrique, I already feel like I'm winning.
Well, I can honestly say I think you're winning because
well, thank you.
This knife has made it for me. I mean, I've loved it. And this is really, it's not very often you get a maker, or you're a designer, but it's not very often you'll get a designer or a maker that's going to bring a run of knives out. And we've got 5 now, and there's not been one that I can honestly say, I wish I didn't get that one. I didn't need that one. Every one of these, it's like being, sometimes I'm making the videos and I'm gushing all these, and it's not put on. That's the joy of these knives. It's not once put on. I don't hear many people complaining about the knives, about the construction of it. I haven't heard, well, other than the wee bit of blade wrap, but that happens in all slip joints. You fix that, so it's gone. Do you know what I mean? But have you had much bad publicity or good? Maybe I don't hear it, but I'm not hearing very much in the downside of these.
No, not much. You know, I'm always going to contend with criticism on price.
Yeah.
And that's the way of the world. Like, not everybody wants to pay what things cost. And part of that for me is an opportunity to educate people on why things cost what they cost. and because not everybody understands the nuance that is involved in why does this cost, you know, $100 or 100 pounds more than the Italian knife that's of a similar construction and material specifications. And that's a totally valid question, and one I answer a lot. And people, I think, do appreciate and understand the differences in fit and finish. And ultimately, it's up to them to decide if they value that higher level of fit and finish and hand craftsmanship for that additional money, right? Like, I think it's just great that folks have choices. You know, there really wasn't choices in the price point that I'm offering these. You know, you could pay less and get the Italian knives. I'm not trashing those knives. I never will. I think they're freaking awesome. But like, what you're not getting is a perfectly fit, flat and flush back spring in all 3 positions. What you're not getting is skilled hand labor to grind these surfaces flat and flush. You're not getting hand ground, hollow ground blades. You're not getting hand ground swedges. And so, is that stuff functional? Well, the hollow grind is functional. Obviously, you're getting like crazy thin behind the edge thicknesses on my knife. So arguably there is a functional difference. But at the end of the day, you know, pound for pound, dollar for dollar, are those Italian knives a better value? You could certainly make the case, right? But if you value things like really high levels of fit and finish, if you value the performance of a hollow grind, if you value this like really amazing walk and talk, if you value the whole artistic sort of presentation of the product and the uniqueness of everything you get, well, then here's a choice for you. Yeah. What I can promise everybody is, like, I'm not price gouging you guys. Yeah. Like, I demanded a certain level of execution on these things. Otherwise, I would not put my name and my grandfather's name on them to sell them. Bottom line. And it costs what it costs. And it costs more than I think people think to make these things, because these are ground as an assembly by hand to be all flat and flush. Once they do that, if you take this apart, all the parts inside are numbered. And so this is a numbered matched set. Yeah. So that means once they do that operation, the parts cannot be mixed. Each one of these knives is now a numbered set. That means they have to track that way through manufacturing. And versus other knives parts are made en masse, put in parts bins, and then pulled out and rapidly assembled. So it's like you've already slowed down the manufacturing process and increased the amount of skilled labor to do it. That stuff doesn't come cheap. And, you know, I also have dealer distribution. I made the business decision that I thought the best way to have success as a new brand and as someone who doesn't have a track record as a knife maker was to use the dealer network, because number one, they reach a larger audience, and number two, they lend credibility to the product, right? Like, well, I might not buy this knife from Ben, I don't know him, but if Frame Our Knives in the UK says they're good enough, I'll buy it because I trust Frank, because I've been buying knives from Frank since the 90s, you know? And so, but given that fact, like, they have to make money. So they have a standard margin. So you take the manufacturing cost, you take their standard margin. Obviously, I cannot do this for free. So I have to make a reasonable margin. and then you get the price. And of course, like, you can only charge as much as, what the market will tolerate. And you're just hoping like that number sort of lines up, So like, you made the comment earlier, I think before we were recording, like I could probably charge 150 pounds more. Well, maybe I could, but I don't want to, because I want to make my reasonable margin, and I want you guys to have the confidence to buy these things. And, if I'm lucky, you don't buy just one, you collect the ones you like. I already recognize that I was asking a good chunk of change, in this time of inflation, costs going up of everything. And of course, I started this project before all that crazy shit started to happen. So it's like, Yeah. And so like, I'm very price sensitive, guys. Like I don't look at this and see like dollar signs. I can't wait to gouge everybody. It's not like that. It's like, this is what it costs to make. This is how the knives have to be for me to be satisfied. And I know if I'm satisfied, 99% of you guys will be satisfied. And I believe that. And frankly, after having 1,000 of these out on the street, that's basically what's happening.
I mean, the proof of the pudding's in the eating. The knives are selling. There are people buying these. And so
they're buying them. They're emailing me.
There you go. I mean, it's obviously a product that people want to own and are willing to pay the price for it. I mean, Dan and I've already had this conversation. Dan and I probably, not in the foreseeable future, we won't own or buy a Jack Wolf knife because they're just out of our price range. But that doesn't mean that we would automatically think that they're not worth it. Dan's already sort of waxed lyrical about his experience, the whole experience of just having a Jack Wolf knife in his hand. I've had the privilege of looking at Paddy's knives, but the fact of the matter is that there are certain knives that are always going to be outside people's price range, and some people are going to sort of complain about it or whinge about it a little bit, and other people are just going to appreciate the artistry and say, well, it's there, but it's not. I'm not there yet. And it's maybe something that you build up to or aspire to or whatever else. I mean, for goodness sake, Paddy's only got me into the whole GEC thing, so I can slowly but surely see him. I started out buying £30 sacks, for crying out loud, so I can slowly but surely see my bank account being drained very quickly, thanks to Paddy's influence. And Jack Wolf knives are still on the horizon for me. They're still on my radar, but they're not quite within my grasp. But that's fine. The main thing is that there are people out there who have the money to buy it and want to buy it and appreciate the product for what it is. So I don't think you've got anything to justify, to be honest. It's one of those things.
Well, I don't look at it so much as a justification as much as an education.
Yeah, explanation. Yeah, I see what you mean. Totally.
Yeah.
Can I just quickly weigh in here? I'd just like to say that Ben, me, Stephen, and Judd, me, Paddy, and Judd, all view things differently. When I look at something, I know for me, I always look at it as an engineering type point of view. Like, I know, for example, if you move that pin 0.5 mil up or down, the backspin becomes weaker or stronger. I know the steel you use makes the backspin weaker or stronger. I know the tang visit, the shape of the tang, the shape of the spring, everything about that makes that walk and talk absolutely different. And I look at it, and I look at every knife, and I look at the position of where the pin is, what the pin's made out of, absolutely everything in that knife. And I always look at what like the stock is, if it's brass, if it's stainless steel. I look at everything in what different types of metals they are, how they act, how they react when they're cleaned. Do they patina? Do they rust? I always look at something, I think, oh, that's well made, or that's a nice thing, or I see what you've done there, or you've changed that. So I always look at something, how it's manufactured. When I know a lot of people look at it aesthetically, like, or traditionally, where I just generally, I could pick something up and I just think, how is that made? In my head, as soon as it could be a can of Coke, it could be a knife, I have to know, how was that engineered? How is that manufactured? So it's nice to have different people, and I love the way your knives are made, Ben, because you know everything. The fact that you know every part is numbered, every part has to go with the next part. That is what makes you different, and that is definitely where you should be saying, yeah, this is the price and this is what's going to be, because of I know how everything. I know where all my materials have been sourced. I know what's happening, when it's happening, from start to finish. You are so involved. You're not just the designer. Your heart is in that factory with them, and that's what makes it the Jack Wolf knife different. Is the fact that you're making them knives inside that factory. When they're making them, your spirit is there with it. And I think you don't get that with, and again, I love Italian knives. I don't think you get that with it. And that's why you don't get that perfect finish. And you do with yours, because you're not just making a product, you're making something with your heart and soul. And it shows, the engineering shows in the jacket. So everyone who's thinking, oh, I can get one $100, £75 cheap or whatever, that's what it's missing. It's missing Ben's heart and soul inside. So pay the extra money and get this amazing knife.
Oh, honest to goodness, I'm going to have to inject something here for our watchers, because they're going to start thinking that this is a complete bromance going on here. So I mean, we got to get a wee bit of cynicism in here. Is there anybody can complain about Ben's knives, please? Any complaints? Have I mentioned that I think it's a fat spear? Too fat? No. Okay, we'll come back. We'll come back to it.
Yeah, is there any question that you haven't been asked? In all the amount of podcasts you've done, is there any question you haven't been asked that you thought you would have been asked?
Wow, that is very thought-provoking. I don't know. I'd have to think about that. People ask me which one's my favorite. I have a very hard time answering that question. And I honestly don't think I have one.
Well, I can honestly say this one so far is my favorite. Without a doubt. The others are fantastic, but this is my favorite.
No.
Yes.
All right, here's a question no one asked me. And we're just being honest here, right? I think this is the stuff people want to hear. No one's asked me, which is the one you're the most scared to bring to the market?
Ooh.
Meaning, like, which is the one you don't think is going to do as well as the others?
I'm not sure that...
The double swell center, definitely.
Honestly, that one, it's right up there, because that's by far the most polarizing. But honestly, the one I've been worried about the most, Stephen, is the canine.
Really?
Do you want to know why? Because number one, it's the first spear point I'm bringing to the market. And my fear deep down inside is least popular blade shape of the ones that I sell, between clip point, sheep's foot, and spear point. My fear has been spear point will be least popular. I could totally be wrong. These are fears. We all have them, right?
I don't think anything to worry about. You talk about the GEC buyers. You said when the fat spears come out in GEC, gone.
Correct. Now, here's something that's been very interesting to me. I feel like a lot of my buyers, and this is me just like litmus tests, collecting the information I have available to me. I don't have statistics, but I think a lot of my buyers are modern knife guys who finally found a slip joint they like. I think I'm getting slip joint guys, but I honestly thought from the get-go that the majority of my buyers would be slip joint guys. But I think the majority of my buyers are modern knife guys who finally see something cool and different that appeals to them. Whereas to the slip joint guy who loves the traditional knife, I might just be a bridge too far. You know, I'll never know that for sure without taking some kind of statistically relevant poll, you know.
Wouldn't that be
but this is
poll?
Yes, it would. And now as far as the canine, it was just like, it's a spear point and it's got this wavy handle that's so unusual to the modern knife buyer. They've never had anything that looks like that. You know what I'm saying? And like people's inclination is like, is that going to be comfortable in my hand? That looks like it's going to be uncomfortable in my hand. And so that's why this one's made me nervous. I could totally be unfounded, but I'm just being honest.
Well, all I can say is, Ben, you're safe, because as soon as I voice an opinion about anything, the market shifts their way. So everybody is going to go against me. So don't worry about that at all. You're safe.
Ben, I put my video up this afternoon, just the first impressions. And the first thing, when I opened the knife, I didn't want to hold it in my hand because I was frightened it wasn't going to be comfortable. But boy, was I so pleased. But I genuinely was nervous in the video in case I had to say, no, I don't like this. But it was absolutely amazing. Thoroughly loved.
Right. Now you had the benefit of not having to shell out the money for it, right? My fear is guys who are looking at it going like, man, I don't know about that. I don't want to take the risk. You know, it's totally different when you don't have to take the risk versus when you take the risk. So that's where the fear has been. But I believe in it. I've held the prototypes. I've made the tweaks to make sure it's ergonomic, not just in my hand, but every single person who's picked this knife up at the 5 shows I've been to. Like, this knife has been in thousands of hands, and I've not had one person be like, oh, this is terrible. Not, you know, I hate the way this feels. And so like, I trust that ergonomically it's going to be okay, but that's different from someone making a purchase decision.
Yeah. And so what you're talking about is not so much about what your faith in the knife. It's more a case of how it compares in terms of the other knives, whether or not they're going to be as marketable or as appealing or as attractive to the buyers themselves.
Whether or not they'll sell.
Yeah.
Exactly. Whether or not they'll sell. Because I think a lot about, it's unreasonable to expect they'll all perform the same. I mean, there's 12 models, you know, so it's like 12 models. There's got to be a dog in there somewhere, maybe 2, maybe 3, right? So it's like, that's the kind of stuff that people don't ask me about, and I'm surprised. It's like, hey, Ben, which ones do you think aren't going to do well? It's like, oh, I think about that all the freaking time. You know, I try not to, but, you know, it's like, how could I not? And
I now have this,
like, to me,
I have this image of you lying asleep at night going, is the canine going to shift? Is the canine going to move? Yeah.
Ben, I have a question. Do you think you'll ever produce one with like I know we talked about it earlier, having like older scales with a modern blade and stuff. But do you think you'll ever do like an organic handle, like a wood or a bog oak or something like, or a French oak or something more exotic like an ebony? Do you think you'll ever put like a bit of nature into the knife, or do you want to stay away from that completely?
So that would depend on several factors. If all the factors lined up perfectly and I could do one in ebony, the answer would be yes. I would love to do that because I really like that stuff. And I think then the guys who really like the traditional knives would be like, that was the touch it needed to get me off the sideline. You know, it needed something from nature to be less cold. You know, like a criticism has been these knives leave some people feeling cold. I totally understand that if you're used to the warmth of the classic traditional knife that's just chock full of warm natural materials, you know. Now, what are the downsides of that? Well, number one, the biggest one is shrinking and swelling. Like, I live in probably the driest climate in America, in Phoenix. It is bone dry. You put things in our climate, whether indoors or outdoors, if it comes from a humid or moist environment, it's going to suck the moisture out of that material, you know, relatively quickly. And you take any kind of natural material, wood, bone, ivory, horn, whatever, it will shrink and it will move. And I've had personally several top dollar custom knives from a maker in Brazil, from a maker in Oklahoma, come to Arizona and literally pull the knife off separate the liners from the spring, lock up the knife to where I couldn't open it because it dried up so bad that the material tightened up and twisted.
Yeah,
and so I've had some.
We don't have that problem in the England or UK. That's
relevant. Let's say I was going to attempt it. Well, there'd have to be some serious prototyping and testing that would have to occur. I'd have to get like 10 of them made, and I'd have to send them to all the corners of where these knives are sold. And you know, I'd be like, okay, you're in a really humid environment by the sea, you get one. You're in a bone dry place like me, you get one. You're in Florida, you get one. You're in somewhere freezing cold, you're in Canada, you get one. Everybody put it on a shelf. Don't treat it. Don't moisturize it. Put it on a shelf and let's let it sit there for a year. You know what I mean? Yeah. And let's see what happens. You know, yes, it would be nice, but there's also material availability can be a challenge. Like what you can import into China or what they're allowed to export when it comes to natural materials becomes limiting. So for me, it was like, there's a lot of risk in natural materials. There's less availability. It was like business decision. it makes more sense to stick with these modern materials that also suit these modern knives really well. Growth opportunity, expansion opportunity, figure out how to implement modern materials if possible.
Also, just another quick one. Have you ever thought of something like really, really wacky scales? Like you get like jade or boron, carbon nitrate, something like that, in completely different material than what people normally use onto your scales to give them that sort of like, here's like a traditional slip joint with like a completely different. I'm not saying, but you must think about these things and think, well, what can I do that's different from other manufacturers and other people that have already done it?
Yes. So understanding the limitations is as important as understanding what's out there for the options. So whatever is put as a scale material has to be sold in sheets that can be put into a CNC machine and cut. So if they're like sold in little pieces, it's not going to work for this type of mass production. For guys hand making stuff, they can make handles out of whatever they want. Also, how does it respond to being machined by cutting tools in a CNC? Some material will shred, chip, you'll get a ton of loss, or it'll shatter, it'll waste a bunch of time, it'll screw up the machine. So like I have to balance like what is machinable, available, price appropriate, and sold in sheets, versus like what's available, and I got to find something that fits that criteria is what I'm trying to say. I am 100% open-minded to whatever you guys want to suggest. And if you have more information than, I'd just like to see this, like if you've seen it on another production knife, that gives me sort of a box to work in. Okay, well, who made that knife and where did they get the stuff? And maybe I can ask the manufacturer what experience they had with it. But I would love, like, my opportunity with these is it's small batch production, generally speaking. Like, to do 75 or 100 and something super funky, I'm all for it.
Brilliant.
But I don't know where to get some of this stuff or even what to use. I mean, my experience as a collector has been in traditional knives, and I don't even know half the it's the wrong word. I don't even know half the stuff that a lot of these cutting edge guys are using because I wasn't paying attention to that stuff.
Boys, we've been going for over an hour now, so I would suggest that we wrap it up. If only to let Ben get his lunch. What do you reckon?
I had lunch before we started, so I'm having fun. I love this. This is great. I'll tell you what's been an amazing blessing for me is like it's the relationships and the friendships, right? Like that's the common thread between the whole community is not only that we like knives, but like we'd all be friends if we were all in the same town or we all went to the same school or whatever. Like we're just long lost friends. You start realizing that, yes, I have this knife hobby in common with you, but I also like this. Oh, I also like that. Oh, I like this movie. Oh, I also like that movie. Like we're all just friends. And what's been so cool for me is having a product that is internationally appropriate, right, for carry allows me to, and guys, it's a lot of extra work to get these things over to the UK and to Europe. Like it's kind of a pain in the ass, I'm not gonna lie. But it's so worth it because like I'm getting these relationships that I may never have had access to. Like I'm hanging out with 3 dudes in the UK and it's like noon here. Like this is amazing. And how else would I have had this opportunity if it wasn't for this blessing? So I love it.
And the one thing I will say, you always said from the very beginning, when we used to go on with Bob on the chat show, you always said you would get it into Europe and you would get it into the UK. And I have heard that said so many times, but very few people actually carry it out. And I have to say, I thank you for that. And I think it's proven popular here.
It's people are skeptical by nature, right? Like that's our nature. If we weren't, we'd get taken advantage of all the time or we'd fall off bridges or whatever, like we're skeptical and we're careful by nature. And so there was obviously some sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like people were looking at me with a cautious eye in the beginning, and especially overseas because of like, here's this American, we don't even have access to him really, and it's like, can I trust him? Can I trust the product? all I can ever do is be honest about everything and very straightforward and answer questions. And like you said earlier, let the product speak for itself. Like, I believe these are really nice knives. I believe these compare favorable to $600 custom knives, you know? Yes, they're not cheap, but when you look at what they are, I feel like people are going to be satisfied. And so, but what's great about coming to a place like the UK where not everybody's bringing products to you guys is if you guys are really into it, I feel like there's sort of an urgency to support a project like mine because you want more stuff like this.
Yeah,
you know?
We
that's
appreciate
that's
you,
it. Yeah,
all of us.
but that's it.
And
I
then,
mean, it's we get access to such a limited selection of things like this that to be given the opportunity to even see them, never mind buy them and own them, it's been a great thing to have over here.
I mean, that's why this wee podcast, I'm hoping, because it's going to get more UK viewers than most of my podcasts, because we're bringing an American, knife designer over, and they're going to get to hear who you are, that they might never do. They mightn't watch any YouTube in America. So I'm hoping that this is going to bring you into the home rather than just on a page.
That would be great. Ultimately, what I'm trying to do different from what other people do, obviously in the product, it's that I think a lot of the companies in the market are delivering an amazing knife. Like, you go to the Blade Show and it's like, holy crap, there are amazing knives everywhere. There's so many great choices for knives. So as a brand, as a company, what can I do to set myself apart? Well, that's where I saw the opportunity to deliver a better emotional experience when you buy the knife through the unique packaging, through the extras, just through all the thought and care that goes into that, because I see a missed opportunity, frankly, with a lot of my competitors not doing that stuff. The other thing that's super important to me is, like, I am very available for everybody. I am very easily reached. I'm on my, phone or computer or whatever, pretty much every waking moment of the day. I encourage anybody who has a question, reach out to me. I'm here to serve you guys, and I have this sort of unique point of view as one of you guys, like I'm a knife nut. I'm a feverish collector. Like, I totally understand your sentiment, your concerns. I want your feedback. I'm completely open to your criticism. Like, you're not going to upset me. You're not going to shake me. Be honest with me. Please don't be rude. Please don't be disrespectful. But if you're going to be, like, go, that's fine. You're just not going to get anything out of me, if you're that way with me. But if you're respectful with me, I'm happy to engage with you, learn from you, answer your questions, do whatever I can to make your life better. So I feel like a lot of brands miss that opportunity too.
What knife does your wife carry?
I can't get her to carry one, Stephen.
It took me years. I've actually got Sally in the last 2 years. She's got about 3 knives now. They're all small, but she just loves them now. And she would never have carried one. And that's not bad to get somebody in their 60s to change their whole outlook.
No, yeah, I understand that. Yeah, she has like nail clippers in her purse. She's probably got little scissors, like makeup related, the stuff they have. They're like tools. And I just have not been able to get her to carry a knife. And as you've been married for a long time, you got to pick your battles, right?
Yeah.
And,
what about the children? Have they shown any interest?
They're still a little young. My daughter, more so than my son, honestly, which is kind of interesting. She really likes all the things. She likes the artwork. She likes the pogs. She likes the cloth. She thinks the knives are interesting, but they don't yet, and maybe they never will, have the fascination with the knife. You know how, like, we have the fascination with the knife, and I firmly believe, like, this is genetically encoded in our DNA because it's man's first tool. Like, you look that up, man's first tool was a cutting tool. It's just a rock they like chipped to get sharp, and it's like, so you're telling me, like, from long back as man was able to make a knife, we have had knives in our lives every single day. They affect every single thing we come into contact with. It's a fascinating conversation to have with people. Like, think about everything, literally everything. At some point, everything came from some piece of material that had to be split or cut or sawed or something. Like, some cutting tool came into contact with everything.
The other thing is that I agree with what you're saying, but the knife is the one thing that people might not like pen knives, but they use a knife every day. Everybody uses a knife every single day. We just have this fascination with the collecting traditional or locking knives in a pattern that you like. And I just find it really strange that women haven't followed and maybe got women making knives that are a design feature on them that men wouldn't have.
Bringing we're bringing an interesting angle to it, definitely.
Be careful what we say, because I think this could come to some dangerous ground. So just very quickly, Ben, what are you allowed to carry? Just so we know, what's your state rules on what can you happily walk around with? What outside?
So Arizona is arguably the freest state in the country. The question is, what can't I walk around with? And the answer is nothing. I can walk around with whatever the hell I want. I can walk around with 2 swords on my back, 2 hatchets dangling from my belt, a switchblade in every pocket, and a rifle in each hand. Like, this is Arizona. So it's very different from where you are.
What about a Jack Wolf coin?
If there's enough demand for one, I can do one. I know where to get them made.
But I would have a Jack Wolf coin, 100%.
Agree.
Because it's going to be, it ain't going to be a normal coin, is it? It's going to be a coin on steroids.
It's not going to be a normal coin.
I'll tell you what it's going to be. It's going to be modern art. That's what it's going to be. It's not going to be a coin. It's just going to be a piece of art, and that's what I would look forward to seeing the Jack Wolf coin, because I know that's not going to be a piece of copper or whatever. That's going to be a piece of art, and that.
No pressure there, Ben. No pressure.
Yeah, not at all.
What's your favourite sack?
So okay, I'm happy to answer that question. I don't typically carry one. Now there's one that I've traveled with a lot. Of course, I think is it the Pioneer? It's an A-LOX. It has scissors. It has a big spear blade and maybe a can opener.
Yep.
Yeah.
Pioneer X.
Yeah.
Pioneer X. I like
yeah.
that Pioneer X. I feel like it's extremely practical. But the one I use the most, and I just keep it at home, my parents bought for me in like the 90s. They went to Switzerland. They went to Europe on a vacation, like a once a year, they'd go somewhere nice. And they brought me back. I have no idea what it's called, but it's like that thick and it has a clock on it.
Oh, you got
timekeeper.
You got the
Is that what
timekeeper.
it is? The timekeeper? Yeah.
Man, that's a collector's item.
Yeah, very much.
I mean, it's probably, 25 years old.
Yeah,
at
yeah,
least.
sure.
And I love that thing, dude. It's got, so instead of, I think it's got a pen. It's got like an ink pen.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a little screwdriver that slides down into the corkscrew.
Yeah.
I mean, I love that thing. It's got screwdrivers. It's got a saw blade. So that's like the multi-tool I use at home for whatever the heck odd jobs around the house. And then, yeah, those are my 2 favorite sacks.
There you go. Good choices. Good choices. I approve this message. Good question, Dan.
The other one, hold on. Look, let me throw in one more. There's the little tiny one that I used to keep on my keychain. And it was like really small and you could keep it on your keychain, but damn it, going through the airport like 4 times, I forgot to take that sucker off and I kept having to throw them in the trash. Yeah. And I got so mad because, like, you know what? You want to piss off a knife guy? Make him throw his knife away.
Yeah. Ben, it's okay though, because Dan's now got all of those because he buys all the TSA knives from America.
And from America as well.
Yeah.
From America as well, yeah.
So I stopped buying those.
Yeah. Yeah, that every single time you go through an airport, you see people doing that. It's just a nightmare, really.
If there was a knife, Ben, that you haven't got, in your collection. What would be the knife you would love to have before you go on the wooden box? Which one would you like to have of any knife?
That's an amazing question. Wow. Oh, I would say something from Tony Bowes. I'd have to think about what that would look like. Probably something with elephant ivory. I know it's a little taboo. I apologize for that, everybody. I apologize. I just responsibly harvested. I wouldn't want to have anything to do with it if it was irresponsibly harvested. But something made by Tony Bowes, I'd have to think about what the knife would be. So maybe I'll have to get back to you on that on our next podcast. But definitely a Tony Bowes slip joint with an ivory, with ivory covers, some kind of shield. Probably a multi-blade, even though I prefer single blades, just because to own a masterpiece like that, I feel like it'd almost be a shame if it only had one blade. Yeah. So I'll think about that. You know what? I'm going to look around online, try to find what that is.
I spent my bedtime hours now on the internet looking at knives. It's really sad. And not only all day.
No, what's sad, Paddy, is that I do exactly the same. It's not good.
Yeah, I'm guilty as well. I'm completely guilty of that. Probably stuff.
You are not alone.
Yeah, this is like a support group.
Ben, it's been absolutely fantastic having you to come over here on our little podcast, and you're our first guest. I'm truly honored that you came. I really want you to come back again at a later date, and hopefully the news will just keep getting better. And the news will be getting better over here in the UK, that we can now get these good knives that we weren't able to get before. You know, without having this hassle of going through customs and wonder if we're going to lose it on the way back. This is just fantastic. So thank you so much from all three of us. I'm sure the boys would like to thank you too. But
absolute pleasure, Ben. Absolute pleasure. Good to meet you.
It's been educational, Ben. Your knowledge and your love into it, and your heart and soul into everything is amazing. Really, it's been an honor. Yeah, really good.
Well, I really appreciate you guys as well. And I want to thank you very much for the opportunity to spend time with you, for putting me in front of your audience. I feel blessed and humbled, and I'm happy to come back anytime. I'll make time for you guys because this is great.
Thank you so much indeed. Really appreciate it. Keep on knocking them out.